Who's that person?
Okay, our next presentation is Barrett Rock and Chatter's analysis of wood cellular structure in early Holocene charcoal fragments from the Yucatan reveals post-glacial human activity in forest composition. Barry Rock couldn't be able to join us this afternoon or this morning and be presented by Jim Chatters.
Yeah, we have to be very sorry for Barry. Poor Barry is down in the Galapagos Islands exploring. Okay. Someone who knows how to use this program. This is unfamiliar. How do I make it run? Oh, just that. Okay, so it's not. All right. It's not filling my whole screen. Okay. The charcoal we're talking about, what Barry's job was to identify the charcoal from the Sagittaria and Oyo Negro site, or the Lamina and Oyo Negro sites. Lamina is in the Sagittario cave system. Oyo Negro is in the Outland cave system, and this shows you the locations of them. There's a great deal of charcoal in these cave systems. I mean, in some of them it's just riddled with it. We've had archaeologists who work in the area frequently make claims that they find concentrations of charcoal, therefore human beings are responsible for them. And that is a presumption that one should not make. It's a very active environment. It's been a thorn forest in the late Pleistocene. It was a jungle since about 10,000 years ago. So there's always wood around. And even though these are jungles, and you'd think of jungles as being wet places, they do dry out seasonally, and so they're subject to forest fire. So there's a lot of natural sources of charcoal, and there's flowing water in these cave systems. Charcoal is easily mobilized, and I'll talk about that again in a moment. But so there's a great deal of charcoal that gets concentrated in the cave systems. So the problem that we had in Oyo Negro, or Oyo Negro is an example of that. You can see the amount of charcoal we're seeing in some of the areas. And this is part of the bathtub ring in Oyo Negro. It circles this entire 200-meter diameter structure with a concentration of charcoal about equivalent to that. So there's a tremendous amount of this material in there. Our goal in Oyo Negro was mainly to look at paleoecology, not to look at human activity. But in Lamina, it's to look at human activity. Is the charcoal that is found in great concentrations, as I'd said, in Lamina, is it from human activity or is it from the natural deposits from the region around it? So what I did was I submitted these charcoal samples to Barry Rock, who was one of Sam Meacham's professors in college, so he came well recommended. So I sent them to Barry, and I sent them to Barry blind. He had been doing some of the Oyo Negro identifications for us, and so I also sent him Lamina material to identify, but didn't tell him why it was there, what it was associated with, or anything. It's just, here's some samples, could you identify them? What he did, I'm trying to catch us up, that's what I'm doing. So what he did was he did the identifications using the scanning electron microscope at University of New Hampshire, looking at really fine detailed cellular structure. And the main features he was looking for were vessel elements, wood fiber forms, vascular ray structures, and so on, that can be seen in tremendous detail by SEM. What he found in looking at Oyo Negro and Lamina samples was that in Oyo Negro, he found a large number of genera, found 8 genera and 10 species represented. In Lamina, there were only 3. Now, there's the Oyo Negro deposit, both deposits are potentially from jungle environments. None of those trees that we found would be out of place in a modern-day jungle environment, which is this, right outside Oyo Negro. The woods from Oyo Negro, most of them have idioblastic rays, vascular rays. They're tiny. Those of resinous woods are much larger, and when they're heated, they change. So looking at them vertically in this case, this is a wood that does not have a high amount of resin in it. This is a highly resinous wood that has been subject to high heat, and so you have an explosive expansion of these vessel structures. The wood from Lamina, oh Jesus, this is easy to move. Wood from Lamina looked primarily like this. In fact, okay, I'm going to keep my hand off of that. It all looked like this. All the Lamina wood was torchwood. Only a small amount of wood from Ojo Negro was torchwood. So if we go back and look at that list again, those in red are the torchwoods. They're highly resinous woods of the Burseraceae. The blue are woods that are not highly resinous, and Metopium, I have starred down there. We found more of our specimens were Metopium than anything else, and Metopium is the poison sap tree. You are not going to be using that underground to heat and light because it will kill you. Okay, so it'll blister your lungs. So clearly that was natural material. It was not the result of human activity. So basically the material from Lamina was torchwood. It was one of the most exciting findings we had in this whole project. Was the numbers came back from Barry, and we were out working at Ojo Negro, and I looked at his results, and it's torchwood, 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 candlewood, copal. So all this material was torchwood. So it was very clear that the work that was being done at Ojo Negro, the wood that was being burned at Ojo Negro was all torchwood. It was being there to light the place for people. A tremendous amount of it being used to light them. So we're hoping to do some more identifications of wood from that site and date some additional samples. By the way, all the identifications were the dated pieces that we took out. So there we go. Now, caught us up a little bit. I will introduce myself. I'm the last speaker in this session. And I'll just have to find how I put myself on here. Just click it off?
Yeah, you can just close it if you want.
All right.
And then you're right there.
Okay. I like this layout where you can see it beforehand. It's got both of them highlighted for some reason.
If you click on it just once and then double click. There you go.
Okay, there we are.
Double do it.
Yep. I work in a Mac. This is a PC. This is foreign stuff for me. Okay, now how do I turn it on? All right. Right, yeah.
All right.
Okay. One of the biggest problems we have in dealing with these underwater caves is radiocarbon dating or any kind of radiometric dating. As I mentioned in the introduction, these places are a complex chemical soup. They're an active environment. Out in the outside world, you have the fluid mechanics of air moving things, but in underwater, you have the fluid mechanics of water moving things, and it is a much higher capability than air of transporting materials across the landscape, at least outside of a hurricane. This gives you another feel for what those caves are like. Absolutely freaking gorgeous. But they're very active environments. When you get hurricanes in the system, water flows through it at high velocities and can transport things around before it drops to lower elevations. I think in some of these hurricane systems, the water will rise, how much salmon on a hurricane is like 3 meters or something like that? When a hurricane comes through, it's about a 3-meter elevation rise, so it can really mobilize materials in these cave systems. We have a lot of megafauna. We have quite a few humans that are presumed to be late Pleistocene, although most of them are currently, for all intents and purposes, undated. Attempts have been made to date some of these. We also have cairns, trails, and the ochre excavations that Ed talked to you about. And so we're trying to get ages established for these activities. And these are some of the attempts that have been made. The ones on the left are human skeletons that people have attempted to date. The ones on the right are presumed fire hearths. And I see very strongly presumed because most of them probably are not. This particular one is This thing is very sensitive to touch. Okay. All right. This alleged hearth here is just a pocket in the rock that has caught charcoal and concentrated in it. And the age of the material in that locality runs over supposedly a single hearth, but the age has run over a 1,000-year span. So this is natural material being collected. But folks have attempted to identify organics and claim to be, but not actually, collagen, but unidentified organics, according to Irv Taylor. They've used bioapatite of bone, which, as Deanna mentioned, is highly subject to recrystallization and contamination by calcium carbonate in the water. Damn it. Can't move the arrow without changing the thing. They did speleothem by uranium thorium dating, and the Chon hole skeleton, they extrapolated the ages of flowstone through tufa and came up with a 13,000-year date, but you can't extrapolate from between one medium and another, and you shouldn't extrapolate dates anyway. But so it's in the 11,000-year range is the actual age of that thing. And Muknal, there's underlying charcoal. Charcoal is highly mobile, so we can't really trust that number either. So we have real problems with dating in these sites. Problems are, very quickly, collagen is never preserved. We are very, very low success frequency in dating charcoal, or in dating collagen. Charcoal is problematic because it's inert, mobile, and naturally occurring. Organic material, dead inorganic material, and organic carbon are ubiquitous in these environments. As witness this brown material in the bottom of that photograph here, that's bat guano, tremendous amounts of it. And in the bottom of Hoyo Negro, we have a whole lot of bat guano. And uranium thorium is unsuitable for dating bone and teeth directly because uranium moves readily in and out of the bone structure. So those are real problems that we face. So first of all, the bones almost always lack collagen. We are 1 for 25 in Hoyo Negro in attempts. I've stopped trying. I'm not trying to find. In fact, we were successful in getting it collagen once out of one individual, and we could not get it again out of the same individual to confirm the age that we got the first time. The bone looks really good. It holds up well, but there's no protein left in it. Unidentified organic material in bone is not reliable because the food chain is old. I ran dates on 3 what had been living things when Beto caught them. And the remipedes came out almost 1,600 years and 800 years old, although they had been swimming around a few weeks before. And isopod, which is lower on the food chain than the remipedes, came out dating almost 5,000 years old. So you can't take unidentified organics, as it did in the case of Naharon, and assume that you'll have an actual age estimate. So there's an ancient foundation of the food chain, or these materials are being highly contaminated by dead inorganic carbon. The animals themselves are affected by the dead inorganic carbon in their system. Next, charcoal is highly mobile. It can blow in, wash in, and even after it washes in, it can dry out, and then the next time a hurricane comes in, it can be immobilized and transported elsewhere through these tunnel systems. And in places like, oh God, what's the name of the cave system that car washes in? Oh, okay. I didn't hear you, but that's okay. Anyway, there's a downstream slope to the tunnel there. So anything that comes into car wash cenote is going to flow downstream. And the site of Muknal, where there's a skeleton, is downstream of that. And so there's a great concentration that they're assuming is a human activity area because the charcoal concentrated down there, but it's really washing in from Muknal, or from the car wash cenote. So that's a big problem. And when we look at dating in Hoyo Negro, I've run through and dated charcoal that was found in bat guano piles. And you can see that the bat guano dates pretty uniformly in age. The charcoal in this particular case is 300 years older. Seeds are about uniform in age. Charcoal is 1,000 years older. So charcoal is highly mobile. It's also an environmental, the charcoal is probably an environmental signal. In the early Holocene, we have a lot of fires. This is just a graph of the fires by numbers of cave systems that charcoal of that age has been found in. And you can see a really high pulse there between 11,500 and 10,000 years ago. So there's a whole lot of charcoal, a lot of burning going on at this time. And this is either because the megafauna are now gone, there's too much fuel left over from the megafauna not eating it, and so the whole system is just subject to fire extensively, or human beings are going in there and burning the damn thing in order to get some food. So one or the other is going on, but there's a whole lot of fire taking place. Bioappetite may be contaminated by inorganic carbon in the water, as Deanna had mentioned. I ran dates, John Southon ran dates for me down at UC Irvine of water that we got out of the site at different depths. And you can see that the water in the freshwater system dates just a little younger than 2,000 years. And that in the saltwater at the bottom dates between 12 and 14,000 years. So dead inorganic carbon is a significant problem if it in fact is crystallizing in this older material. So how do we deal with this? Solutions. We have tried different things in Lamina and in Oyo Negro to get around these problems. In Lamina, I just talked to you about part of it, is identifying the charcoal and establishing whether or not the charcoal is there as an artifact or as a natural process. If you're going to establish something as an artifact, and this is something I emphasize over and over and over again, especially to colleagues who want to claim pre-Clovis kinds of things, is that an artifact is something that cannot be attributed to natural processes in the context in which it is found. And in this cave context, we know what is found because we got Lamina here, or we got Oyo Negro here with all this environmental charcoal being deposited in it. And we know that not all of it is occurring in Lamina. There's only a small number of species that show up in Lamina, and they all have that feature of having the exploded vascular rays from all the resin that's in them. So the fact that it differs from what the natural signal is says that, in fact, this is an artifact. So we're able to date these artifacts in Lamina and came up with dates ranging from 12,200 to 10,200 cal BP over a 2,000-year span of time in that site. And we hope to get some more of them. We've only dated a few of those charcoal clusters, and so we may end up with even older activity showing up in the site. We know from the flowstone on top that this was abandoned for quite a long time before the water came up at 8,000 years ago. So it's going to be really interesting when we find out more of that. In Oyo Negro, it's a little more complicated. In Oyo Negro, we have this huge 200-foot diameter pit, 100 feet deep, in which we have found so far 24 species of animal, including very large ones like gomphotheres and saber-tooths and giant ground sloths, all the way down to skunks, possums, mice. There are a lot of bats and fish too, but they don't really count. And we also have our human Naya found down in there. So at what times were these animals arriving in the site? Well, they fell from the point where that arrow is, by the way. That's how far they came down. So we have a lot of different species we've taken out. I've attempted to date pretty much every one of them by one means or another. One success is that bear the first try, and the next try was a failure. So I still don't know if that answer is right. It may be the same age as the human, it may not. We can't use water level, sea level, to establish ages of things, not very effectively anyway, because the shallow tunnels, if you're working the shallow tunnels, they've been above water between 7,000 years ago and 125,000 years ago. And it's essentially from the last interglacial till this interglacial, they've been dry. So things that are found in those tunnels could be anywhere in that 120,000 year time span. In Oyo Negro, most of our bones are found at 40 meters depth. So they are somewhere between 10,000 and 75,000 years old. So yes, we're late Pleistocene, terminal Pleistocene, but beyond that, we can't get any better with water level. So I'm trying bracketing ages. We have terminus post-quem dates, and they're generally based on bioappetite, because our bioappetite is contaminating older, not younger. Typically it goes younger, but in this environment it goes older. For terminus antiquem, we have crystalline calcite, this flowstone that's deposited over the top of these things, or in the case of Naya, crystalline structures that formed on top of the bones. We have overlying guano, we have overlying charcoal, but again, overlying charcoal's got its problems. And finally, sea level. Things are older than 10,000 years, period. So, and then here's some of the examples that we have, and as you can see, the age differences range anywhere from 30,000 years ago to 30,000 years to about 1,000 years between the terminus antiquem and the terminus postquem. So there, Cuvier number 1 is at least, it's as old as 41,000, but no younger than about 19,000, based on uranium-thorium dating. Nahochichak, our new genus of giant ground sloth you saw the pelvis of, is somewhere between the 10,000 year age of the guano on top of it and 39,000 years old for the bioappetite of its orthodontin. So we are trying to find ways to get narrower. Naya, our human, is of the most importance to us. And Naya, when we reported her in Science, it dates between around 12,000 and 13,000 years ago, based on uranium thorium as a terminus antiquem and a terminus postquem of 12,970 for the radiocarbon age of her enamel. Now, to go into that a little further, the minimum age is based on overlying calcite. The maximum age is based on tooth enamel, which was dated in 2 labs. Came out within 15 years of each other. Should be the right age, but we really couldn't be saying that in Science because the reviewer didn't want us to say it. So we had to work with the range of ages. That's not very satisfying. So we've been seeking a higher resolution and trying to find out ways of establishing whether or not this is actually an accurate age. And this is kind of approach we're going to use on all the different animals that we have that we're able to date with tooth enamel. We did FTIR analysis on the tooth enamel to find out if we had a change in crystallinity from what would be normal for tooth enamel, and also a change in the molecular structure. And as you can see here, the crystallinity indices, that's a hard word to say, after 3 days of conference. Between modern tooth enamel and Naya, the crystallinity index is really not significantly different. So her crystals in her tooth enamel have not changed in their size. Consequently, they probably have not been significantly modified. And if you look at the molecular composition, look at where the peaks are in comparing the 2 graphs, and the peaks are in exactly the same places, and there's no reduction in the phosphorus peak, and there's no secondary peak occurring around where that arrow, Naya arrow, points to, that would show you significant amounts of replacement of phosphate with carbonate. So that looks like that enamel is intact. So again, based on this, that data is probably correct, but let's look farther. I was looking for answers one day, and finally I realized we got lucky. We've got 3 situations where we can reasonably suggest we have the correct age for the specimens. One is we have a tiny little shelf on the side of that huge pit that has some charcoal and a possum in it. Both of them had to float in at the time the water level was at that same elevation. So the probability is they are the same age of arrival. And again, charcoal is a problem, so I say this with some trepidation, but it seems to be that that is the accurate assessment in that situation. The actual age, the charcoal age, is right around 11,000 years. The bone age is 14,000. So there's roughly a 3,200 year difference between these two if you look at the medians. Have a bat in its own guano. That we can very, very clearly say happened at the same time. Each of these bat guano piles is all about the same age throughout, so the guano bats in it are arguably the same age. Again, about a 3,200 year offset between the two of them. A reservoir effect, if you will. And then we have an intact, you see on the lower left of that frame, an intact skeleton of a Shasta ground sloth covered with flowstone. Because of the nature of the diagenesis on the surface of the flowstone, it doesn't look like that set of bones that was sitting right above water all the time it was there had been above water for very long before it started getting covered with flowstone. So it's the flowstone is close enough to the actual age. The bone bioappetite then is still about 3,000 years off. So we're getting the same answer each time. So if we look at the graph, luckily there are 3 points to not make this just a line between 2 points. But you can see the R squared there is 0.9997. That's a pretty good straight line, even though we have 3 points in it. So it looks like we have a consistent offset at 3,200 years. And there are reasonable reasons. I mean, Ed and I could talk about what the reasonable reasons are for this offset. It looks like the calcite is coming in and depositing these bones shortly after they're here, or shortly after arrival. And this isn't too far off the offset we have between fresh calcite and the modern world. We have about, is it 1,200 years? 1,300 year span between modern crystalline calcite and the atmosphere. And it's been repeatedly checked with dates of matching materials as we go down through cores. So we take that 3,200 and we look at Naya and where she lands, and that equation I showed you previously predicts Naya to have an enamel age of 12,900 years, and the measured age is 12,896 years. I think there's a pretty good relationship here. So it looks like that near 13,000 year age for our human skeleton in Ojo Negro or Naya is actually around 12,900 years. She is quite literally one of the 2 oldest human skeletons yet found in the Americas. So that's what I have for you today. And I have to say 2 things before we get into questions. One is I am immensely proud of my team. I am hugely proud of you guys. This was fantastic. You all did an amazing job. Second, I didn't realize I was getting emotional. Second is, this is my 50th year doing this. I gave my first presentation at the SAA 50 years ago, so wow. Blows my mind. This is the team we're working with.
Well, I think we have a few minutes.